Hello, so in this video I'm going to talk through a comparison of a B grade A-level history essay and an A-star grade A-level history essay, and this was a video that was requested by somebody in the comment of another video. So if there is something that you'd like me to cover or a specific area of A-level history that you want me to make a video on, please let me know and I'll try my best to put something together on it. This is specifically discussing Edexcel A-level history essays, but I'm hoping that this will be useful for other exam boards as well, in terms of the technique and the skills that I'm going to be talking about. So I'm hoping to really kind of draw out the key areas of difference between a top level essay and a kind of mid-level essay. So the structure of the video is as follows. Firstly, discussing the difference, in my view, between an A-star or an A-grade essay and a B-grade essay. Then I'm going to introduce the question I'm going to look at. Then we're going to look at an example of an introduction, an internal paragraph, and a conclusion for both a B-grade and an A-star grade essay. And so you'll clearly be able to see the differences. And then I'm going to give something of a summary, kind of tying it all together. So what is the difference between an A-star or an A-grade essay and a B-grade essay? So here are kind of 4 key points to think about when you're writing your essays to help you achieve the top level. So the main difference between a B-grade essay and an A-star essay is the analysis. Analysis is just linking back to the question, explaining your points and why they're important to the question. So an A-star essay has more analysis, it's less narrative, it's weighing up the relative significance of factors or themes at the end of each paragraph, and it's using more developed analytical language. It's not just saying this was important. It's kind of thinking about the phrases it's using the words it's using, and it's offering more developed language. We're going to see clear examples of all these things in just a minute. The second point is about the evidence used, and what we see from A-star essays, top-level essays, is more precise and wide-ranging evidence. Again, we're going to see an example of this in just a minute, but it's less generalized, it's more specific, more detailed. Again, that doesn't mean it's narrative and it's kind of telling the story, but it's using evidence effectively. And then the third point is this idea of structure. So it offers a clear structure, again, linking back to the question consistently, and finally, having a clear line of argument. And a key difference between a top-level answer and maybe a mid-level answer is that the argument is substantiated, that it's fully explained. There is a why. Why is the argument the case? So let's go into the question. So this is a question from the Civil Rights Paper 3 of Edexcel A-Level History. And the question is, New Deal legislation barely changed the lives of Black Americans in the USA. How far do you agree with this statement? So as I said, we're going to look at an introduction for a B grade and an A-star grade essay. Then we're going to look at a paragraph from each, and then the conclusion from each. Just because of the video and the nature of this video, I should say, I haven't been able to include the whole paragraphs. I've had to shorten them a little bit, but hopefully you can still get the main points. So let's look at the B grade essay intro. So I'm not going to read through this fully. You could always pause this video and read through it fully. But the key thing that I want you to think about this when you read through this is, how could this be improved? So this is the B grade essay intro. And if you just have a quick read of that, what are we getting from this intro? So I'll start going through it. Hopefully you've had a chance to kind of look at it if you've paused the video. If you haven't, pause the video now. I'm just about to start going through it. So we get something of an argument here, quite a lot of detail, probably more detail than you need in an introduction, and it does give us something of an argument that it's agreeing with the question. But what we're not getting is the why. We're not getting the why was that. We get something about kind of segregation, but it's not really fully explained why the lives of Black Americans barely changed. Also, what we haven't got is a definition of how this answer is going to weigh up this idea of lives changing. So we could have really got into that. let's look at the A-star grade intro. So already we look at it, it's much longer. Again, if you just take some time to read through this, and you could think about what makes it so good. So if we just have a look at this one, we can see there's really clear context. It defines what it's going to talk about in terms of the lives of Black Americans. It talks about political rights, and social position, and then it talks about the economic position. So we're clearly going to get a social, political, and economic kind of assessment of the impact of New Deal legislation. If we go back to the question, this question is what I call a status question. You know, it's the extent to which the lives of Black Americans were changed. And in lots of different A-level history papers and questions, it's often to do with the status, you know, the status of women, for example, in 17th century Britain, or the status of the poor in 1600s, or you know, in other papers we get these status questions. Now, not always, but often a good approach to status questions is social, political, economic, and we can clearly see that this is what this answer is going to do. And then we get a really clear argument towards the end of this intro, and if we look at the language, this was fundamentally undermined by the limited scope of such legislation, arbitrary imposition of overly racist housing policies. Therefore, it will be largely accurate to argue ... So the language is much more developed, isn't it, than the B grade essay. Obviously, the B grade essay, it's still a good, you know, it's setting out what they're going to say, and the B grade essay is a good essay, but it's not as advanced as this A-star essay. And the language is a way that we can, you know, clearly identify that. So let's have a look at the B grade paragraph. Now, this is an example of a really solid paragraph. It's a level 4. It's a good, you know, it's a good. They get a good score for this. It's a good paragraph, and it is following a clear structure, kind of point, evidence, judgment. It's following that structure, and I've color coded what's going on here. And you can see that it's got some precise evidence. The PWA, $63 million, 30% of PWA housing being occupied by Black Americans, ... This was a fundamental aspect of the New Deal, which did improve the lives of Black Americans during the New Deal, ... So we're getting good analysis. Again, we get the evidence here about the monthly wage. This did change the lives of Black Americans, ... And then the summary, overall, is clear that there were some changes to the lives of Black Americans on the New Deal. However, these were mainly isolated cases, and even within these agencies, the second-class status of Black Americans was enforced. Okay, now, with this essay, this is kind of given almost like a for and against, and this is a paragraph that's giving some evidence for, you know, that's saying that the lives of Black Americans did change. But it hasn't really, again, got into how it's going to be weighing up whether the lives of Black Americans changed or not, thinking about maybe social, political, economic. It's almost looking at these things in isolation. So it's following clear structure, and this is why it gets level 4, because it is giving analysis, it's giving good evidence, it's linking back to the question, but it hasn't really drilled into the question, what the question is precisely asking, in enough detail in terms of this idea of status. So if we look at the A-star grade internal paragraph, so I've had to kind of cut this back a lot and not include as much of it here. But if we look at the evidence, firstly, how precise it is, so we're getting precise evidence, and then the next thing I want to focus on for this A-star paragraph is the summary. It's very, very clearly weighing up this paragraph. And it's, again, using developed analytical language, and it's looking at, in this paragraph, at the economic status of Black Americans. And it's talking about such deteriorations in the economic status of Black Americans disproportionately affected different groups according to their industry of employment or area of residence, and the New Deal was only having significant tangible effect on the economic status of Black Americans as a singular aspect of their lives in the USA. So it's kind of really weighing this up against the other areas it's looked at, the social and political elements. So it's really clearly kind of weighing it up there. So I think that's really useful to kind of see. Okay, let's look at the conclusion. So have a quick look at the conclusion. What does this do well? How could it be improved? If we look at this as a B grade conclusion, it is answering the question. It's using some good language here. You know, it's fairly superficial and limited. The lives of Black Americans did not improve. Some New Deal legislation was racist. Fundamentally, there's an intent to change the lives of Black Americans, but the lives barely change. So we get an answer to the question and we get some kind of justification. If we look at the A star conclusion, again, it links back to this definition of how it's assessed whether the lives of Black Americans have changed or not, by linking back to social and political status. And it talks about these being short-lived and limited, and therefore overall it agrees with the question that the New Deal legislation barely changed the lives of Black Americans in the US. So hopefully that's a clear kind of illustration of the differences between a B grade essay, which is still a good essay in exam conditions, to an A star essay, which is just pushing the analysis further. So in summary, what can you do to help you get to the top level? Use the examiner's reports that are available to read through top level answers, so you get used to the kind of language and the approach and the structure and the level of detail that you need to get to the top level, to get level 5 A star. Think about whether you're developing your own analysis enough, whether you are really getting into what the question is precisely asking you to do. Thirdly, think about your evidence. Are you using precise enough evidence? Are you using statistics? Are you using dates to really signpost the evidence to the examiner? And you're using precise evidence. And then finally, thinking about your analytical language, and I've done other videos on that, thinking about the words that you're using, the phrases that you're using. Think about the different types of questions. You know, if it's a significance question, you know, there's certain words and phrases you're more likely to use than if it's, say, a causation question. So hopefully that was helpful. Please leave a comment if you've got any questions or any other requests for any videos. Thank you for watching.